Guardians have a pair of minor league signings to add to the team. We'll talk about why those might matter, and we have your questions on the prospects, rotation, procedural moves, trades, DH, and more, and your reactions to the Guardians offseason through the end of 2024 on today's Locked On Guardians.
Tanner Bobby the Guardians, and you're listening to Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Friday, or whatever day it is you're listening to it, and Happy New Year. This is Locked On Guardians. I'm your host, Justin Latta, and it's a mailbag episode. It's a mailbag Friday episode of Locked On Guardians. Jeff continued to be off this week to be with family, so thought it'd be a good time to open up the mailbag for the start of 2025 to see what's on your mind. Honestly, I love these episodes so much because I like to hear directly what you guys are thinking, what you want to hear about, especially at this time of the offseason when there's just not a lot of storylines going on. And the Guardians have already made a ton of moves and they haven't made much else. But we know they've made a pair of minor league signings, so we're going to talk about the impact those players could play. We'll get to your mailbag questions and your offseason reactions so far through the end of December and into the new year. Before we get started, I want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get on the regular season action with FanDuel because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I am Justin Ladd, as I said, solo host for this episode of a mailbag episode of Locked On Guardians. I have been covering the Guardians minor league system since 2007. I've been with a whole host of blogs throughout Cleveland. I appreciate all the opportunities I've had to write with a bunch of different people in Cleveland who've gone on to do great things, and were just really fun to work with over the last, several years. So going back almost 20 years now. Most recently, I'm at the News Herald in the Morning Journal, doing a lot of freelance work there, covering the minor league system. My own newsletter, Next Year in Cleveland.substack.com. You can subscribe for free there. And previously, I was also the editor-in-chief of Guardians Baseball Insider. Previously, Indians Baseball Insider, started by the great Tony Lastoria. Enjoyed that. A lot of people I met along the way there too. And one of the things we covered a lot there, and I cover a lot now, is minor league signings. So let's start with Jake Anchia, who is a minor league catcher. The Guardians announced this signing today. His agent made it official earlier in the week on X, Twitter, whatever we're calling it these days. I don't even care. But this was the first one that came up earlier in the week. So let's start here. Anchia was the Mariners' 7th round pick out of Nova Southeastern. That's in Florida. In 2018, mostly has been a defensive first catcher. This really is a minor league depth signing. Nothing against Anchia, obviously, but Cleveland, we've talked about, needs catching depth throughout the minor leagues, honestly, because right now they don't really have a whole lot of spots filled for catcher. You look at AAA right now, Anchia is going to get some innings at AAA because right now it looks like him, Cody Huff, and Dom Nunez. And I think Huff is going to be the starter at AAA. I think he should be. He had a good year at AA. He skipped high A. He had a pretty solid AFL campaign. Cody Huff should get the lion's share of the at-bats in AAA, but Anchia should also, kind of compete with him for some at-bats there and give Huff some days off. Huff's already a defensive specialist. I'm sorry, Anchia should be going to AA. It's Dom Nunez. I'm sorry, I take that back. I think Anchia might go to AAA because he's 27, almost 28. So actually, this might be how it goes. I wonder if they'll carry 3 catchers. Right now, the only catcher, if we have a Huff, Nunez, and Anchia rotation in AAA, that leaves Cooper Ingle at AA. So I don't know. I don't know if I see the Guardians having Cody Huff repeat AA next year. So we'll see who the odd man out is. But Anchia, again, 28 years old. Baseball America did name him a couple of years ago the Mariners' top defensive catcher in the system. So he, does have a lot of defensive skills he comes with. He's done a good job throughout his career throwing out base runners. I haven't really checked the minor league stats on him otherwise, but I know he does a good job throwing out base runners in the minors. Not much to offer offensively. There's been some power. He did show some power in college. That was part of the thing that got him drafted. His draft year, looks like there was some power that showed up on the Cape. The Guardians loved Cape performance, but his performance wasn't great on the Cape. But there was a lot of power to be had there. He has struck out quite a bit in the minors. Hasn't walked a ton. So this really looks like a lot of defensive focused kind of player, the kind of guy they like, and they are willing. They don't really take on a lot of guys who strike out a lot, but the one place they are willing to accept strikeouts as catcher. And anybody who adds defensive value at a position of premium value, so that's center field and catcher, I guess sometimes second base, but generally catcher, they are okay with strikeouts, as we've seen over the years with Mike Zunino and Austin Hedges and Bo Naylor. If you strike out a catcher, they don't care. Anywhere else, you can't strike out, but catcher, you can if you're a good defender. We know the Guardians are a defensive first catching organization, so Anchia fits that. So yeah, he'll probably go to AAA. I'm just guessing based on age. Although Anchia's never played at AAA. He has spent the last 2 years in AA with the Mariners. I can't imagine he came to Cleveland to go back to AA. So I'd imagine AAA is going to be the place for him. I don't see them putting Cody Huff back at AA, and I don't see the point in putting Cody Huff back at AA. So I'd be very curious to see how that plays out, because Cooper Ingle is going to be the guy that gets the majority of the at-bats in AA, and Huff should be the guy playing in AAA, because Huff had a good season last year, like I said, and he is a strong defender, and he did have a good AFL campaign, and he did show some offensive improvements last year. And they have Dom Nunez, who's coming to camp too, so that's going to give them at least 4 catchers coming to minor league camp or major league camp. Obviously, Bo, Hedges, Nunez, and Chia. I would bet on Cody Huff getting an invite. I think it's worth inviting Cooper Ingle, but we'll see. I also wouldn't be surprised if this is not the last catcher they add this offseason one way or another. Minor league catching depth is very, very thin for domestic levels. Very thin, and they need a lot. And guys get hurt, especially catching. And they like to have 3 catchers at every level, and they kind of do right now, but we'll see how this one plays out. We'll see if Anchia goes AA. The other signing that I think we'll probably see more for Cleveland on the field this year, if anything, is Luis Frias. So Luis Frias is actually younger than Anchia. He is a 26-year-old, will be 27 this coming year, reliever. He's been mostly a reliever throughout his major league career. He did start in the minor leagues a little bit. Frias does some of the things that Cleveland likes. He has a good fastball. He has some extension in the delivery. It's gotten a little bit better. His arm angle has been kind of up and down over the last couple of years, so I'm curious to see what they do with that. He did pitch in the postseason for the Diamondbacks in 2023 in the World Series, made 7 appearances, pitched fairly well. He was kind of their bridge guy in the early innings if a starter got pulled early, because Arizona was kind of thin in the rotation. It was mostly Zach Gallen and figure out the rest. So Frias did play a role there. He was at Toronto last year. Looks like he's got a good, interesting pitch mix here. The cutter's been good for him in the past. Nothing was good for him this past year. 2024 was a bad year. He did have some injuries that he went through in 2024. It looks like he dealt with some right shoulder inflammation last year. So 2024, kind of a lost year for him. Did throw 29 games in 2023 with a 4 ERA, but I don't think Cleveland's really interested in the stats. I think they're interested mostly here in a guy who can give them some depth in AAA, obviously. And as we know with the Guardians, I'm not sitting here saying, oh, it's going to be a great deal and he's going to be something special for them. They've already signed, Parker Mashinsky, whatever. But there's always one of these guys every year for Cleveland, right? They always have the Scott Atchisons, the Jeff Manships, the Enya de los Santoses. They always seem to find these minor league free agent guys that come up and pitch in a relief role that you don't expect to be, a contributor. I'm not saying he will be. I mean, who had Pedro Avila being one of the better relievers last year and being on the postseason roster? I don't know how many times last year I was like, oh, Pedro Avila will not make the postseason roster. You can bounce him out of here. And we all thought he'd be DFA'd at some point, right? So the Guardians always seem to find value in some of these guys. And I'm not saying this will be the guy, obviously. Like, I'm not seeing anything on the Savant page or anything I've looked at so far that says, yeah, this is a guy they're definitely gonna turn into some beastly reliever that no one could have seen coming, right? I'm not saying that, but they do this with relievers. They have done it with relievers, so I wouldn't be absolutely stunned. The slider's been a good weapon for him in the past, and like I said, mostly it's been the cutter. He does throw hard. I'll be interested to see what Cleveland has in mind for him as well. Looks like probably mostly reliever. I can't imagine in AAA. They actually do have some AAA depth too. We have no idea what Slade Cecconi's role is going to be. We have no idea how the rotation is going to fill out. So maybe Frias is a guy that kind of gives them some swingman innings, but they should have guys in AAA to cover for them between Cantillo, Allen, Nikhazy. You still have Will Dion. You should have Ryan Webb there and Aaron Davenport. And I would send Austin Peterson to AAA, but that's just me. We'll talk about him a little bit more. But they should have enough AAA guys to cover innings, but he might be able to fill that swingman role. And who knows? He might end up in the bullpen. Relievers get hurt. We talked about it on Thursday's show. Relievers also regress. So who knows what'll happen this year to guys like, Sabrowski. They'll have Enrights there. Avila, who knows if he'll repeat what he did a year ago. Other guys, Walters. So plus, Stefan's coming back, but maybe he won't be back right away. So definitely some options that are open for guys to get room here. And they know Cleveland's done this in the past. So not really a surprise with Frias. Hopefully not the last thing we see from them this offseason. All right, we'll get to your questions next. We've got a ton. We got some procedural moves to talk about that you guys are interested in. Some guys that are off the radar prospects. Some evaluation of Slade Cecconi we'll talk about. The rotation. The health of David Fry when he comes back. What DH looks like. Some trades. And then I also asked for your reactions to the offseason so far. And I'll tell you why I asked for those as well coming up later in this episode of Locked On Guardians. Thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for tuning in. Got more. The regular season for the NFL, we know, is winding down. Week 18 is here. The playoffs are coming. It is not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, if you are a new customer, you can finish the season strong with FanDuel. Get $200, $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Great time to cash in a little bit with FanDuel with this offer. Has so many ways to pick up a W. We saw that Bailey Zappi is starting for the Browns on Sunday or Saturday against the Ravens. I think they're playing proceeding at this point. I would put $5 down. I might do this. I'm not a new customer for FanDuel, but I would. If I was, I'd put $5 down on the Ravens winning that game and probably covering the spread at that. And I would be collecting $250 in bonus bets to do something else with that going into the postseason. Maybe bet on the Buckeyes. They're on a roll. So not only can you bet who will win the game, you can also go to FanDuel for players who will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com today, FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's get into your questions. Mailbag time. Like I said, I do love the mailbag because instead of me coming up with whatever I think you'll find interesting, you're telling me what you find interesting, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate all the responses. We had a ton of questions this week, so I'm going to try to get to them all. But if not, we will save them for a future episode, or I will just message you back with the answer. So first we get Rodney Hill. What AA or AAA arms or position players could be effective next year that flies under the radar, is not on the top 30? So I'll be very honest. I am not looking at anybody's prospect list right now. I am working on my prospect list, something I'll be able to share a little more of here in the coming weeks. But I am not looking at anybody's top 30s. So I'm going to go off my own and tell you off the radar guys. For other people, I know we've talked about Austin Peterson before. Jeff and I both really like him. And I don't think he is going to, I know he wasn't on any top 30s last year. He is definitely in my top 30. He's definitely in my top 20 for sure, Austin Peterson. I don't know if you're a regular listener of Locked On Guardians, you know Austin Peterson is not off the radar for us. So I don't know, should I count Austin Peterson or not? But here's the thing with that. If Austin Peterson's throwing any significant innings for Cleveland next year or 2025, we're already this year, what on earth happened to the rotation? Because right now you've got at least 4 guys you should be able to pencil in, and you've got Shane Bieber who's coming back, right? And then you've also got guys like Slade Cecconi and Joey Cantillo and Logan Allen and Doug Nikhazy who should be able to give you starts. So as far as starting pitchers that come off the radar, I would like to say there will be none, because I like to believe that, again, you've got 4 guys in AAA. You got 5 rotation guys. You're trying to figure out McKenzie. You got Bieber. That's 10. If the Guardians are going to make the playoffs again in 2025, I really don't see the team making the playoffs any more than 5 starters. They made it last year, so it's possible. So I guess I'd throw Peterson in that mix. I would maybe throw Ryan Webb into that mix. He's not really a top 30 guy for a lot of people. As far as position players, that's another hard one too. Under the radar, it's very hard. Because at second base, we're talking about Juan Brito maybe being there if they don't make a move. Carl Santana's locked in at first base. They are locked in a lot of positions. There's really not a lot of battles. They need to, unless they're upgrading externally, it's still more young players. So I'd be very surprised if that does come up. If Father Time catches Carlos Santana and this doesn't work out, is CJ Kafis a guy who could make his way into that role? Maybe. Noel is up there, so we'll see how much of a run they give him. Maybe Cody Huff is a guy who gets some major league at bats this year. You definitely need more than 2 catchers, and we know David Fry can't catch this year. So maybe Cody Huff is a guy who pushes his way to the major leagues this year. I wouldn't be surprised to see that. I don't think Cooper Ingle is quite that guy yet, but I wouldn't be surprised to hear more about him if he pushes his way to AAA in the second half, hopefully. Petey Halpin's not a guy in my top 30, but he's on the 40-man roster. Maybe there's a chance he makes it up there as well. And then, after that, I think you're talking about Cody Huff. CJ Kafis would be interesting, but I'd have to be really worried about CJ Kafis making it, because that means the experiment with Carlos Santana at age 39 went very, very wrong. We also had a question from Ben, who said, which pitcher on the active roster pitches the most innings in Cleveland this year? So I'm going to assume active roster, you mean not 40-man roster, because that's the active roster I look at. A guy not in the 40 who pitches a lot of innings this year, I wouldn't count out maybe Nick Mikolajek as a reliever coming up. Bradley Hanner's a guy in AAA that's really interesting. I've said Austin Peterson before, he would be interesting. Ryan Webb could be a guy who gets on the roster and helps out there, but I think Nikhazy being in front of him hurts. So I'd probably have to go with the reliever that's not on the 40, and I'd have to say, Andrew Misiazek, I wouldn't count him out. They need another lefty, and Eric Sabrowski was a good story last year. Will he continue that? I don't know. Maybe Misiazek is a guy who jumps in there. Probably most likely a reliever. I like Bradley Hanner, though, too, but I question to see where the innings come from. Maybe they throw someone like a Ryan Webb into the bullpen and that works out for him. So that's not a guy on the active roster, but they don't have like super talented depth, but they have guys that they need to look at again. We're going into another season, 2025, where it's going to be, hey, we need to see this guy play, instead of, hey, these are the guys that we know can lead us to a division title. And they have some of those guys, right? You've got your Quans, you got your Bivies, you got your Jose's. I think Manzardo is going to be one of those guys. I really do. But you're still not sure about Rocchio, and you're not sure who's playing second base. You're not sure about Bo Naylor. And you got your rotation, you got your bullpen. Is that enough to be like, okay, well, we have these positions set, we can try out other guys and still win? But that's what it's looking like in 2025. It looks like we're still got a lot of young guys they still need to get looks at, and that's still a weird spot to be in. Scott on Blue Sky wanted to know the ranking of Slade Cecconi's pitches on a 20 to 80 scale. We talked about his secondary pitches being a strength, and wonders why Pittsburgh gave Luis Ortiz for two prospects, thinks it's too good to be true. I can't speak for Pittsburgh on the second part. They needed a first baseman. They really liked Spencer Horwitz. I thought Spencer Horwitz was interesting. He did a lot of things the Guardians liked. If I were the team that had Ortiz and Josh Hartle and Michael Kennedy, I'm probably not giving those guys up for Spencer Horwitz. So that's a fair question. I probably wouldn't do that if it was my team and I was considering that trade. But Pittsburgh's Pittsburgh. I don't know. That is an interesting question. I do like Ortiz, though. I think Pittsburgh's going to regret. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to regret giving him up, because I think Pittsburgh's got a good rotation, but Ortiz has a lot of stuff that I think he just does really well. He throws the ball hard. He throws strikes. Good extension, which we know Cleveland likes. He's got a couple of good secondaries. I think you're going to see them help him develop maybe a changeup or some sort of another off-speed pitch that can offset things against left-handed hitters. That's why you got the cutter last year. That could use some improvement, but I think Pittsburgh might regret that just a little bit. As far as Slade Cecconi, so fastball ranking, you can't just look at velocity, right? We know Slade Cecconi throws hard. He's got a 94-mile-an-hour fastball that can get to 98, 99 at times. Unfortunately, in today's day and age, throwing hard just ain't it anymore. You can throw 97, 98. Hitters are training for fastball velocity. So Cecconi, to me, probably a 50 fastball right now. I think maybe has potential to be 55, but it needs better shape. So I'd probably go with a 50 at best for Cecconi, just based on velocity, because velocity matters. It's half the battle, but it can't be a straight fastball. The slider's been good for him in the past. I think that's something that Cleveland will help him with too. I'd probably give that a 55. I think the changeup's a 50. I think the changeup could also be a 55 because he's done some work on that that's gotten really helped that really get really good. I know his teammate Merrill Kelly helped him out with that last year, and Cleveland has done a good job helping guys with changeups in the past too. And then he's got a curveball he doesn't throw a whole ton of, but the numbers have been very good against it historically, or at least they were listed when he threw it. I'd probably give that a 45, maybe a 40. So, he's got a couple of 50s, a couple of 45s. The changeup and the sliders, they might be a little bit better. Everything's going to start with the fastball, though. I think all this stuff has to work off the fastball. So Cleveland's got to get to work with Cecconi on fixing the fastball. I think the rest of the pitches will be much better because of that. Fastball has potential to be a lot better. It does. So be curious to see what they do with that. More pitching questions from Owen. The rotation is going to include Bybee, Williams, Ortiz. That leaves Lively, Allen, McKenzie, Cantillo, Cecconi to fight over the last two spots. Is there still room to add more pitch in the rotation, or is the rotation getting crowded? Do you see any of these starters in the rotation being traded or let go? So I would be surprised if Cleveland does not give Tristan McKenzie one more shot to be in the rotation. And that's going to depend on health. It's going to depend on his confidence level, which has been an issue. Health was not an issue during the 2024 season for him. It was all questions about did he need elbow surgery? He got through the season with no time on the injured list. He was throwing harder in AAA. The stuff was there. It just was a matter of not throwing strikes. Now, not throwing strikes could also be an indication of an injury too. But McKenzie's always been a guy who's had shaky command. Like he doesn't, he's not ever been consistent. So there's a chance, that the elbow issue could still be a problem there. But I'd be surprised if they don't go to camp trying to give him some kind of role. Would they stick him in the bullpen if the rotation doesn't work out? Could they move like a Carlos Carrasco type situation for him? Maybe. I'd be surprised if he is not on the opening day roster. I think that would be right now. I mean, if he goes into spring training and he's just an absolute disaster and they can see his confidence isn't there, which it clearly wasn't last year, or he's not healthy. But I'd say as of now, I think they want him to be, he's out of options. So I think they want to be on that roster. So I would be saying Bybee, Williams, Ortiz, and then Lively doesn't have any options, as we know on the show. If you're a listener, Ben Lively is the king of options who has none. He'll be in the rotation, and I think McKenzie is the fifth guy. And that leaves Cecconi to go to AAA or go to the bullpen, or maybe William and McKenzie goes to the bullpen, and you put Cecconi in the bullpen. I think Joey Cantillo is going to AAA. Logan Allen's got an option. I think there's some things to work on there too, so I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to AAA. But I think it really depends on McKenzie's spring training, or maybe they trade him this offseason. I would not be shocked. There's been a lot of talk about Cleveland being interested in Eric Fetty and Steven Matz. If they were to pull off one of those trades, if they were really interested in adding one of those guys, I'm not really a big Steven Matz guy. The salary looks way too high for them to be realistic on him, unless they're flipping like Miles Straw and McKenzie and offsetting some of that money that he's owed. But I could see McKenzie going to St. Louis in one of those deals for sure if that happens. So I wouldn't rule out a trade of McKenzie either if they try to do something else this offseason. All right. We've covered some pitching. We got to talk about David Fry, first base DH. We're going to talk about some procedural moves as well. And then we're going to talk a little bit about your reactions to the Guardians offseason so far on the rest of this episode. Thanks for sticking with me on Locked On Guardians. I know winter's here. We don't all want to be out doing all kinds of stuff, but look, there's still a lot of events going on. The Cavs, they're playing great. They're a hot ticket right now. Cleveland's got one of the best theater districts in the country. Great comedians are always coming to Cleveland. The Monsters have played well. They're struggling lately, but they always draw a good crowd too. There's a lot of stuff going on in Cleveland, and it's a great time to use Gametime to get tickets to all those events. There's always hot theater tickets. There's Cavs tickets are hot, and Monsters tickets are always good. There's always a show going on. There's always a comedian coming to Cleveland. Gametime makes it easier for you to get tickets to all these events and more with Gametime Picks. It's going to tell you what the best deal is. It's going to compare it to the market rate. It's going to tell you if you're getting a great deal on these seats wherever you want to go in the arena or to the event. And they have great features as well. Like the ticket viewer, you can see exactly where the view from your seat is going to look like. Always find that super helpful. And of course, I always talk about the all-in pricing feature as well. Everybody hates this. Everybody hates getting to checkout thinking you're going to pay X amount of dollars to go to this event. And then it turns out you've got $30 or $40 of fees you didn't see coming. And probably more than that in today's day and age, honestly. But the all-in pricing makes sure you're not fooled by the pricing at the end of your purchase. So turn that on when you use Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONLB. You're going to get $20 off that first purchase. Terms apply, but create your account. Redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. Not Dame time. Game time. All right, let's do a little more quick Q&A here from the mailbag. This one comes to us from Richard Schwartz. Wants to know what happens when Fry is healthy. If he can only DH, how does that affect Santana and Manzardo? I hate the idea of Kyle Manzardo being platoon this year because I think you have to give him that chance. I really do. I believe in Kyle Manzardo. I really do. And like I said the other day, he hit AAA left-handed pitching for the first time in his career, or just left-handed pitching in the minors in general. I think you need to see if he can do it. I think you need to see if he can be a full-time guy. Santana's 39, and yeah, he played almost every day a year ago, but he's going to need days off. I know he likes to play every day, and he keeps himself in good shape, and that's why he's playing still, and that's why he had a good year last year, and he's making more money this year than he did a year ago, which still a bit mind-boggling. He's going to need days off. So you're looking at, like, I think being realistic with David Fry, you don't want to assume anything before June. I think there's a chance he comes back in May, but I think you want to assume more likely, as long as there's no setbacks, you're talking June. So you got April, May to get through with those guys, and these things always tend to work themselves out, right? But I think realistically, it's probably going to be a DH situation where Manzardo and Fry DH like they did a year ago. Santana plays first. Santana gets a day off. Manzardo plays first, and Fry DHs. It doesn't seem like Manzardo can play a position next year. So I would be willing to bet that when he comes back, you'll see a platoon. I'd like to see him give Manzardo a shot to hit lefties the way they did David Fry righties last year, but that's going to depend on how good he is. So we'll see about that. All right, Wally Harris. What do we see the Guardians doing with Will Brennan, Tyler Freeman, Gabriel Arias? Are they candidates for a trade, or is their value negligible? What do you think about Martinez and Schneemann getting looks? So I think Martinez, to me, is a guy I definitely would like to see more of in a starting role. I don't think it benefits him to sit on the bench. They didn't seem to be mentioning him when it came to the second base job. That wasn't a name that like popped up right away, but that could have been just a oversight. We'll see when they get closer to spring training. Schneemann, to me, is a bench guy. I think he's probably a bit of roster fodder, if I'm being honest. He had some good moments last year. He's versatile. He hits left-handed. I don't think you need both Freeman and Schneemann. I think one of those guys seems to be the odd man out because they both play the same positions. One's right-handed, one's left-handed. They've certainly got more money and time invested in Tyler Freeman, if we're being honest. So that might get them a leg up. They both have options. So hard to say. As of January 3rd, Will Brennan and John Kensingwell seems to be your right field platoon while you're hoping Chase DeLauder's feet work next year. Will Brennan did a decent job last year against right-handers. He wasn't terrible. He was close to league average offensively against right-handers, so he platoons well enough to be league average there, and he plays good defense in right. He can back up center. I was much higher on what I thought Will Brennan could be, and he hasn't turned into that guy yet, but he plays a valuable spot in that role. I don't know. Doesn't seem like I'm going to give Freeman a lot more chances. So I think the roster spot could come down to Freeman and Schneemann, and Arias is going to be out of options next year. So I wouldn't be surprised if they also give him a shot to play somewhere too. But I also wouldn't be shocked if Arias is in a trade. Martinez should have value in a trade. Arias does. I don't think Brennan and Freeman really do. I think they're just not guys that you're going to get a lot for because teams see them both as backups. Freeman might have some value in that he plays the outfield and infield now. Brennan might have value as a fourth outfielder, but you're not getting a ton out of that. All right, so the real Fausto Carmona wants to know, with Espino, Henches, Bieber, and Stefan on the 60 day to start the season, who are some NRI candidates? So two things here. We don't know about Stefan yet. We haven't heard what his timeline looks like. Number two, Espino is not going on the 60-day IL. They didn't do it last year when he got hurt because it would start his clock. It would give him major league service time. So more than likely, Espino doesn't go on the injured list unless they are so strapped for a roster spot they have no choice. So we don't know about Stefan. Espino is not going on the 60 more than likely unless something drastic happens. Henches and Bieber will start the year on the 60. So that gives you room to add some of the relievers we talked about today, right? Parker Mashinsky, if you really feel he's a guy who can help the bullpen early on. Luis Frias, Andrew Misiazek. I don't see any NRI guys that are coming to camp. The catching's kind of set, right? Like it's Bo and Hedges. And David Fry is going to go on the 62. Don't forget that. That'll create a spot. They're going to have spots. I expect this team is going to add more NRIs. It's just going to depend on where those spots go. Like I would not give a major league contract to Dylan Carlson, but if he accepts an NRI, which he should, I can't imagine anybody's guaranteeing him a spot unless you're like, I don't know who's rebuilding. The White Sox should probably give him an NRI. That would be a smart move for them. The Rockies should, because the Rockies are a terrible franchise too. The Angels should, because they need anybody to be good. The Marlins should. Anybody should get those teams should all be giving a major league contract because they're going to be bad. But if I was Cleveland, I would be interested in giving an NRI to Dylan Carlson, but Chase DeLauder and all that kind of stuff. So who knows? But right now, yeah, they're going to have spots to clear, and it's going to be Fry, it's going to be Bieber, it's going to be Henches. We'll see on Stefan, and we'll see. I don't see it on Espino. Jeff on Blue Sky also asked about an extra option for Noel. How does that happen? So the rule is, if you're a teenager, if you're 18 or younger, when you sign with a team or get drafted by a team, you get 5 years before you're Rule 5 eligible. If you're 19 or older, you get 4. So Noel came to Cleveland as a teenager before the age of 18, so he got 5 years. However, he didn't play a full 5 seasons in that time because complex leagues don't count, which is, Arizona and the DSL, because you're not going to you have to spend 90 days on an active roster, and you're not going to get 90 days in the DSL and the Arizona fall or complex leagues. So he didn't play enough seasons before his options ran out. So Cleveland there's been no official announcement of Noel getting that extra option. But when I talked to James Harris in November, he said they were optimistic about him getting a 4th option year. But they haven't announced that yet. I know I've seen other guys been written about in MLB trade rumors that it's been approved for. I haven't seen it for Noel, but James Harris was optimistic in November. There's been no official announcement of that. So I guess that's something to ask coming up here soon. We also had a question about Stefan's recovery. Who are some surprising players make the open day roster? I covered a couple of those. And then with the pitchers they draft in 2024, I'd love to see them push some chips in to win at the trade deadline. I agree. I think they should go out and do what the Padres did. Go out and use some of those high school pitchers to go out and add an outfielder, add something you need on the infield anywhere. Those guys have tons of value. They did a great job in the draft last year, adding guys that should have trade value. They've been so focused on, I talked about this on Thursday's show, the contact first approach with guys with speed and defense, the utility infielder types. They've done a great job acquiring those guys. They just don't cover much in trade value. So they did a good job in the draft last year getting guys that should have some trade value, and that includes high school pitchers. So we'll see what happens at the trade deadline, but the Padres have done a great job using that approach. I'd like to see Cleveland do the same thing, so I agree. Jim asked about money and the couch cushions for free agency. I don't know that, there's a lot of free agents left that make a lot of sense. We've talked about Jorge Polanco. I just mentioned Dylan Carlson, but that's, an NRI thing. We had another question too. I'm gonna throw these in the same bucket here. Is Anthony Santander. I've heard some things on Anthony Santander, nothing to get excited about yet, but I don't see it happening because he's got the qualifying offer attached to him. And somebody asked if he was forced to sign a 1-year deal. I could see Cleveland being interested in Santander if it's a short-term deal. I don't think they want to give him a long-term deal. That's why I think they were interested in Gleyber Torres. The qualifying offer makes it complicated, but it would explain getting the pick back for Josh Naylor, right? So I don't know. I'd be surprised, but he's the only one that makes sense only if it's a short-term deal. I'd be willing to get the draft pick if it was for Santander for 1 year and an option or something. I don't know. We had a question about Brandon Lowe. I never get these guys' names right. I apologize. Usually Jeff's still on the name issues, but I think it's Brandon Lowe. Yeah, it was Nate Lowe. Yeah, so Brandon Lowe as a trade for second base or outfielder from Tampa Bay. I don't see them going after Brandon Lowe because he's always hurt. I think he's owed quite a bit of money, if I'm being honest, and we know where we are with that. If he's really in the last year of his deal, which I'm not sure if he is, that does make things interesting if he's a free agent at the end of the year. I'm going to look at that very quickly here while we're rolling through this. Yeah, he could be a free agent. He's got a club option for next year. Okay. I could see it for 1 year. Yeah, if Tampa Bay is looking to get rid of Brandon Lowe, I could see it. But he's played under 200 games the last 2 years. He played 109, 107. He has played over 100 games 3 times in his career. Career high of 149. Although, depending on what you give up, not a big deal because he's a good hitter. And if he gets hurt, you got Juan Brito, you got Travis Bassano, you got some options. And maybe 100 games of Brandon Lowe is really good, and the rest you can figure out. I don't know. I'd be interested. I'm very interested in this right now that you brought this up. I'm glad that was a good question. Thank you, Leland, for that question. All right, a couple things I want to mention the responses to the offseason so far before we got here. And the reason I asked this is because we've been very hard on the Guardians, I think, although some people say we're not hard enough. I don't know. You can't make everybody happy, and that's fine. But I think we've been kind of hard on them, and I'm not saying we shouldn't be, but there's still a month to go in the offseason. Things could still happen. Maybe they could trade for Brandon Lowe. Maybe they could sign Anthony Santander. Maybe there's still something they do. They were interested in Torres, and we're not giving them, a pass for saying, oh, they were interested. Great. I was interested too. But, what does that mean? But I'm curious to see how people feel about the offseason and what, might come ahead. So some dude on Twitter stalked me, had an interesting response. I don't consider myself a Dolan stan, but I seem to ride it out of the front office, and I don't wholly disagree with that. But you said you were pleased with the offseason so far. Add a couple more basement bargain moves, and the squad is rolling. That is not the common response. That's an interesting one. I think they need to bring in at least one hitter. I think in right field, although Brandon Lowe would excite me at second base. If you told me tomorrow that they bring in Brandon Lowe or Anthony Santander on a 1-year deal, I think this team is better in 2025 than 2024, despite all the weirdness this offseason. I don't think, you're talking about bargain basement moves. I don't think a Dylan Carlson and being done for the offseason sells it for me. But Brandon Lowe or Anthony Santander on a short-term deal, that would. Ben says he's good with the offseason so far. He improved the outlook for the future. It didn't get any worse in 2025, and that may be true. They might have just gone lateral in 2025, and they're better in the future years, which I think, honestly, might have been their goal. But he thinks they're better because of the pitching depth. They'd rather have a team that's around 90 wins per year. I absolutely agree with that, to be honest with you. That's what I've said in the show multiple times. Baseball is a long season. If you are a true baseball fan, and I know that doesn't mean you can't be mad at your team and you can't be rooting for them to do more, because you should be rooting for them to do more. You're investing your time and money. They should be giving you back a return on your investment. And he said, once you're in the playoffs, anything can happen. So I don't disagree with Ben here. 2017, 28, how that worked out for Cleveland. 2017, bad luck. 2018, they just weren't good enough. The White Sox won a World Series in 2005, right? And they have been irrelevant ever since. Forget the couple playoff years they just made. They were terrible. As a baseball fan who watches baseball from February to October to November, I would have a very hard time being invested. And I have to be because we do this podcast every day. It would be very hard to show up every day and do this for a team like, yeah, winning the World Series 2025, obviously that would carry for a couple of years, right? We'd be like, whatever. But 2026, 2027, we all be like, all right, well, now we're moving on to summer barbecues and the draft and football, right? Like, you win that World Series and that's great for a year or two and you give up. And then 2 or 3 years down the road, you're thinking, what am I going to do this summer? I'm not paying attention to baseball because they stink. I think sports are fickle sometimes. I know that from being an Ohio State fan. I much rather a team that wins 90, 95 games a year and has a shot, because I hate going into February knowing any team I like, or any season. I hate going into any season of the team I like knowing there's no chance to win. I want to win a championship too in any sport I watch. I do, that I like, for a team I like, but I can't go into the beginning of the season knowing this team has no chance to do anything. I'd rather go in with a chance, even if it means we're not 100% in. I don't know. I know some people don't agree with that. Ben, I agree with you. Pat said it'll be an interesting season. I know Pat's every day. I appreciate you, Pat. If they don't start the year out with the masses, we'll let them know for sure. Andres was a shock. Josh hoped to come back for another part of the season. Neither happened. Maybe the pitching got better. The outfield is still a mess. I agree. That's why I said Anthony Santander in a short-term deal, I think would interest them besides the contract, besides the qualifying offer, but it would make a ton of sense. The infield now is in chaos. I don't know if I call it chaos. It's just it's a very highly unknown. I guess that's chaos. Yeah. But we talked about a Brandon Lowe trade. I would be very excited about that. Yeah, I don't think you can bank on a very consistent season with Brito and Rocchio. But again, we talked about the other day, this team does not usually bring rookies in April to Cleveland. Stephen Kwan was rarity. So I'd be on the lookout for this team to do something else at second base. I really would. MBS Wolf said, I think they made some shrewd moves to reduce the future financial obligations. Sure did that while improving the rotation. Agree with that. And they needed some arms to the system. I agree. Hartle and Kennedy were great additions to the system. MBS Wolf thinks that they went kind of lateral like the rest of us. They didn't help or hurt the team in 2025, just changing the strengths and weaknesses. Yeah, the rotation is better than positions they gave up. Unless the team allocates the future savings from all those trades, then yeah, won't be content. I agree with that. I think they have to allocate those savings somewhere, right? Got to get an extension with Tanner Bybee. Got to add one more hitter to this roster. I think that's what you have to do. And if you don't, easy to be disappointed. Let's end with John real quick here. I know John's an everydayer. As far as off season, been a roller coaster. Started off getting Bieber back. That was great. Floor drops out when Jimenez comes back. Understood that because the starter was obtained in this market when the starting market is really crazy. Was initially okay with Santana and Naylor swap, but now getting nervous. Is it maybe the last move they make? I agree. If that's the last move they make, it looks bad. I don't think it will be, but it looks very bad. That's the case. They've got a lot of unproven guys. They got to make the offseason better with a legit outfielder. I think they're going to evaluate who they had until the trade deadline. I could see that too. I think I'm kind of on the Brandon Lowe trade now. I don't think Santander makes a ton of sense to me just because of the qualifying offer, but if it's a short-term deal, maybe they're interested in that. I'm kind of hinged on the Brandon Lowe thing now. I'm kind of convinced. I think Tampa Bay might want to do it. I think Cleveland's got the pieces. We know they love trading with each other. I think that move to me makes you better in 2025, and at least it gives you cover for not using Brito. And Brito could be a guy you throw into the right field mix. He played right field last year. They really want to see Brito, which I'm not against. You could throw him into that too, and then let Chase DeLauder knock your socks off because his feet are healthy for a change. I don't know. All right. Appreciate all your questions. Appreciate you guys' responses. I hope the offseason's not over from a move standpoint, but we know the offseason is not over for us. We've got so much more coming. The rest of the month we'll be with you 3 days a week, as we have been since after the winter meetings. Jeff and I will be back together Monday morning, talk about Monday morning headlines. If anything happens over the weekend, we'll get Jeff's take on Brandon Lowe now, I think. And I think we'll get his take on some of these minor league signings. We'll also update you on anything else we hear. We'll have Trade Talk Thursday next week. And I believe Friday, Jeff will have another MLB draft show for you. So get ready for that next week. And as we get to the end of the month, closer to spring training, we are going to launch that insider program, getting all the final details set up for that. But like I said, you can sign up for that when we launch it. Going to get an exclusive Q&A, some more mailbags like this with our insiders, I think, more frequently. more prospect and draft discussions, observations from watching games, being at games, especially me being at minor league games during the season. Definitely going to utilize that when I go to spring training this year. Conversations we're having between Jeff and I, between anybody that we talk to in baseball, whether it's writers or scouts or front office people, whoever, any insider info we get, we will pass along to our subscribers. So keep an ear out for that coming at the end of the month as we head into spring training. Continue to let us know your interest. We also have an email address I'm going to hand out too. Totally free to also email the show. I'll get that out to you as well. I know we have a lot of listeners who don't do social, who don't watch on YouTube, that may want to get in touch with us for mailbags like this. So we'll open that up to subscribers and non-subscribers to the Insider program as well. So we'll use that in future episodes too. Appreciate y'all. Oh, I also got to give apology to Dave in America. I am so sorry for yesterday's slip of the tongue. I do appreciate your support, and I don't know where my brain went on that one, but I do apologize for that. I appreciate the following, and I appreciate the questions and all the cool designs you do. Appreciate all the reviews we get. Appreciate all the listens we get. Appreciate it for everything. Everybody have a good weekend wherever you're doing, wherever you're listening to this. Have a good time. Be back with a new episode on Monday again with Jeff. Thank you for tuning in to all the solo episodes this week. Hope you had a good holiday, having a good start to your new year. In the meantime, go Guardians, go.